What is America to the world? Is it an empire? A beacon of liberty? A financial superpower? A military giant? Or something far more complex? For over 2 centuries, the United States has shaped the course of history. But today, America faces a crisis, not just of policy, but of identity. Who are we? What have we represented to other nations? And what do we stand for now? To answer these questions, we must look deeper, beyond headlines, beyond partisan politics, into the character and historical mission of the United States itself. The argument presented in this book begins with a bold, perhaps even audacious claim. To understand its weight, we must first cast our minds back to a world on the cusp of unimaginable change. The 19th century was a crucible of forces, steam, steel, and burgeoning ideas that were forging a new reality. Empires rose and fell on the strength of their armies and the reach of their colonial grasp. But a different kind of power was stirring, one not measured in territory conquered, but in potential unleashed. The claim is this: America created modern times. This was not an act of imperial ambition, not a creation born from the barrel of a gun. The great European powers had perfected the art of conquest, building global empires on the extraction of resources from distant lands. Theirs was a model of dominance, a zero-sum game of winners and losers. But the American experiment, in its ideal form, proposed a different path. It was not through conquest, nor was it achieved through the intricate and often predatory webs of old-world finance. The centers of global capital in London and Paris had long mastered the art of moving money to generate wealth for a select few, often disconnected from the tangible work of making and building. This was not a story of financial manipulation. Instead, the genesis of American influence was rooted in something far more foundational, something visceral and transformative. It was born in the fire of the forge and the hum of the factory floor. It was built through industrial development. The United States built its power by investing in the very sinews of a modern nation, in industry, in continent-spanning infrastructure, in the relentless pursuit of science, and, most critically, in the boundless potential of human creativity. Railroads, those iron arteries, didn't just cross the land. They stitched together a fractured geography into a single, cohesive economic body, turning isolated territories into a unified national market. They connected continents. Electricity, harnessed and distributed, banished the tyranny of the night and unleashed a second industrial revolution. It didn't just illuminate homes. It powered the machines that would redefine work and life itself. Electricity powered cities. The moving assembly line, a symphony of standardized parts and specialized labor, made possible a level of production previously unimaginable. Mass production democratized luxury, turning the automobile from a rich man's toy into a tool for the masses and dramatically raised living standards. And in the quiet of the laboratory, scientific innovation was systematically dismantling old certainties about disease, distance, and the very nature of matter, fundamentally reshaping daily life. This was the crucial distinction. Unlike the old empires built on a model of extraction, taking raw materials from colonies to enrich the metropole, America's rise was rooted in production. It was about creating new value, not just redistributing existing wealth. The idea was simple but profoundly revolutionary. A strong nation develops its people. Through public education and land-grant universities, it invests in the minds of its citizens, seeing them not as subjects to be ruled, but as the primary source of national wealth. It builds industry. It recognizes that sovereign capability, the ability to make what you need, is the bedrock of true independence and security. It promotes invention. Through a robust patent system and a culture that celebrated the tinkerer and the entrepreneur, it incentivized the creation of the new and the improvement of the old. And through this virtuous cycle, it creates abundance. It aims to solve the age-old problem of scarcity, not for a privileged few, but for the many. And in doing so, it inspires others. The American system, at its best, became a template. Nations emerging from colonialism looked not to the old empires that had subjugated them, but to the new power that had built itself from within. From this perspective, America's historical role was not domination, but demonstration. It was to show the world what was possible when a nation commits itself to the progress of its own people. But this raises a profound question for our time. Is this still the role America plays? Has the nation that created the modern world lost the blueprint? This is the story of that system, its creation, its abandonment, and the choice we now face about its future. But something changed. A seismic shift began to ripple through the American economy, quietly at first, then with the force of a tidal wave. The post-war consensus, built on a foundation of industrial might and shared prosperity, started to fracture. The mission that had propelled the nation for decades, the collective drive to build, to innovate, to create tangible value, began to lose its clarity, its unifying power. What replaced it was a different logic, a new set of priorities that would fundamentally reshape the country and its place in the world. The book argues that America drifted away from its productive roots. The boardroom, once a place where engineers and industrialists planned the next great manufacturing feat, increasingly became the domain of financiers and management consultants. The language of production, of tolerances, supply chains, and long-term capital investment was gradually supplanted by the vocabulary of financial markets, of quarterly earnings, shareholder value, and leverage buyouts. The focus shifted from making things to making money from money itself. This wasn't merely a change in business strategy. It was a profound cultural and philosophical pivot away from the tangible world of atoms and toward the abstract world of bits and financial instruments. Instead of industry, finance began to dominate. The financial sector, once a support system for the real economy, channeling savings into productive investments like factories and infrastructure, began to grow into an economic heavyweight in its own right. Wall Street's gravity became immense, pulling talent, capital, and political influence away from Main Street and the industrial heartland. The brightest minds, who a generation before might have designed bridges or cured diseases, were now drawn to the allure of creating complex derivatives and algorithmic trading strategies. The economy was being financialized. Instead of building, speculation expanded. The core activity of the economy began to shift from long-term investment in productive capacity to short-term speculation on asset prices. Fortunes were made not by creating new products or improving services, but by betting on the fluctuations of stocks, bonds, and currencies. This speculative frenzy was fueled by deregulation and financial innovations that created ever more complex and opaque ways to gamble. The housing market, for instance, transformed from a means of providing shelter into a casino of mortgage-backed securities, a shift that would have devastating consequences. Instead of long-term development, short-term profit became the goal. The relentless pressure of the quarterly earnings report created a kind of corporate myopia. Why invest in a research and development project that might pay off in 10 years when you could boost the stock price tomorrow through a share buyback? Why invest in worker training and higher wages when you could cut costs and deliver immediate returns to shareholders? This short-termism starved the real economy of the patient capital it needed to innovate and grow sustainably. It prioritized immediate gratification for a few over long-term prosperity for the many. Manufacturing declined. The consequences of this pivot were stark and painful. The industrial base that had been the bedrock of American prosperity began to erode. Factories that had once been the pride of their communities, employing thousands in well-paying jobs, were shuttered. The term Rust Belt entered the national lexicon, a grim descriptor for a region once defined by its industrial dynamism. This wasn't just about economics. It was about the loss of a way of life, of skills passed down through generations, and of the pride that comes from making things the world needs. Communities hollowed out. As the factories closed, the social fabric of entire towns and cities began to unravel. Tax bases collapsed, leading to underfunded schools and crumbling infrastructure. Small businesses that depended on the factory workers' wages withered. A sense of hopelessness took root, manifesting in rising unemployment, declining health outcomes, and the opioid crisis. The American dream, once a tangible promise of upward mobility, felt increasingly out of reach for millions left behind by the new financialized economy. Financial markets gained power over governments. This economic transformation was accompanied by a political one. The growing power of the financial sector translated into immense political influence. Through lobbying and campaign contributions, Wall Street advocated for policies that served its interests: deregulation, tax cuts for capital gains, and bailouts when its speculative bets went wrong. Governments, which once saw their role as steering the economy for the public good, increasingly found themselves beholden to the whims of the market, fearing that any policy that displeased investors would be punished by capital flight or a market crash. The shift toward neoliberal economic policy, deregulation, austerity, globalization transformed the nation's economic structure. This collection of ideas, often grouped under the banner of neoliberalism, became the new orthodoxy. It held that markets were inherently efficient and self-correcting, and that the best thing government could do was get out of the way. Trade barriers were dismantled, regulations were rolled back, and public services were privatized, all in the name of unleashing market forces. According to the author, this shift was not accidental. It wasn't an organic, inevitable evolution. It was the result of a concerted, decades-long campaign by a network of influential thinkers, corporate leaders, and political operatives who believed passionately in this new vision for the economy. They funded think tanks, endowed university chairs, and cultivated allies in media and government to systematically dismantle the post-war economic order and replace it with their own. It represented a deeper ideological transformation, one that replaced the belief in productive growth with a belief in financial control. At its core, this was a battle of ideas. The belief that a nation's strength comes from its capacity to produce, to innovate, and to invest in its people was replaced by the belief that strength comes from financial dominance and the magic of the marketplace. The idea of the citizen was overshadowed by the idea of the consumer, and the public good was subordinated to private profit. And this transformation didn't just affect Americans. The new American model, centered on financialization and globalization, was exported around the world. Through institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, developing nations were often pressured to adopt similar policies, privatizing state-owned industries, opening their markets to foreign competition, and deregulating their financial systems. This global integration created vast new markets and supply chains, but it also made the entire world more vulnerable to financial shocks originating on Wall Street. It affected the entire world. The break from the mission of production in America had global repercussions. It created a new international order, one characterized by hypermobile capital, complex and fragile supply chains, and a recurring cycle of financial booms and busts. The promise was one of global efficiency and shared growth, but the reality was often one of increased inequality, instability, and a sense that national economies were no longer in control of their own destinies. The world had become interconnected as never before, but it was tethered to a system that prioritized financial extraction over sustainable, productive growth. If America once represented industrial progress, what does it represent now? In foreign policy, the book raises sharp questions. Has the United States shifted from being a partner in development to becoming an enforcer of geopolitical dominance? Instead of cooperating with rising powers, tensions increased. Instead of exporting infrastructure and science, military interventions expanded. The author challenges the narrative that global conflicts are inevitable. He asks, what if America chose cooperation over confrontation, development over destabilization, partnership over proxy wars? The argument is controversial, but clear. America's identity abroad depends on whether it promotes prosperity or perpetual conflict. But beyond the tangible challenges of global competition and economic policy, perhaps the deepest and most corrosive crisis is internal. It's a crisis of the soul, a fracturing of the national spirit that has begun to permeate every aspect of American life. This isn't a problem that can be solved with a new trade deal or a shift in manufacturing. It's a profound uncertainty that has taken root in the hearts and minds of citizens, manifesting in quiet living rooms, at tense family dinners, and in the anxious expressions of people wondering where their country is headed. It is a crisis of identity. The book describes a nation trapped in a labyrinth of confusion, a society increasingly divided not just by wealth, but by worldview. The divisions are stark and growing wider, political, cultural, and economic chasms that seem almost impossible to bridge. We see the gleaming towers of tech hubs and financial centers, existing in a different reality from the hollowed-out factory towns where opportunity has become a distant memory. We see cultural battles waged over values and traditions, where one group's cherished beliefs are another's source of outrage. This isn't merely a collection of diverse opinions. It's the emergence of parallel Americas, each with its own set of facts, its own media, and its own vision for the future, often in direct opposition to the others. This division is amplified and accelerated by a media ecosystem that thrives on conflict. Public discourse is no longer a forum for debate, but an arena for combat. Social media feeds and 24-hour news cycles are filled with a relentless torrent of accusation and outrage. Algorithms are designed to reward the most extreme voices, pushing people further into their respective echo chambers. Nuance is lost, replaced by caricature and condemnation. The space for common ground, for good faith disagreement and compromise, shrinks with every click, every share, every inflammatory headline. The very language we use becomes weaponized, making genuine communication across divides feel like a futile exercise. As the noise grows louder, trust in the pillars of society quietly erodes. Trust in institutions declines. The government, the press, the justice system, even scientific and academic bodies, once seen as neutral arbiters or sources of stability, are now viewed with deep suspicion by large segments of the population. This isn't just cynicism, it's a fundamental breakdown of the shared consensus required for a complex society to function. When people no longer believe in the fairness of the rules or the integrity of the referees, the game itself begins to fall apart. Every decision is questioned, every motive is suspect, and the very foundations of civic life become brittle. This institutional decay forces a painful personal reckoning. Citizens begin to question their own country's moral standing. The stories they were told in school, the ideals they were raised to believe in, now seem to clash with a harsher, more complicated reality. Is America a beacon of freedom and opportunity, or is its history defined by oppression and inequality? This question echoes from classrooms, where debates over curriculum rage, to kitchen tables, where parents struggle to explain the state of the nation to their children. The result is a form of historical and moral vertigo, leaving many feeling unmoored from any sense of shared purpose or national pride. This internal conflict crystallizes around two competing narratives of the nation's past. Some argue, with powerful evidence, that America's wealth was built on exploitation, on the stolen land of Native Americans, the forced labor of enslaved Africans, and the exploitation of subsequent waves of immigrants. In this view, the nation's prosperity is fundamentally tainted by its original sins. Others argue with equal conviction that America's success was built on innovation, risk-taking, and hard work. They point to a culture of entrepreneurship, a constitution that protects property and invention, and generations of people who built extraordinary lives from nothing. They see a story of progress and self-correction, however imperfect. Which is true? The uncomfortable answer is that both are. The nation's history is a complex tapestry woven with threads of both profound injustice and unparalleled human achievement. The challenge lies in holding these two truths in tension, to acknowledge the shadows of the past without extinguishing the light of its ideals. But in our polarized climate, this nuanced view is often the first casualty. We are asked to choose one story over the other, to define the nation by either its worst moments or its best, but rarely by the complicated whole. In the face of this confusion, the author insists that a coherent and inspiring national identity matters. It is not a luxury, but a necessity. A shared story is the glue that holds a diverse nation together. It provides the sense of collective purpose required to tackle great challenges, to invest in the future, and to ask citizens to sacrifice for the common good. Without a belief in the fundamental worth of the national project, the motivation to sustain it withers. National identity is the psychological infrastructure upon which all other forms of progress are built. The consequences of a negative self-image are devastating. A nation that sees itself as fundamentally corrupt at its core cannot lead. It cannot project confidence on the world stage or inspire others to follow its example. Its diplomacy becomes apologetic, its alliances become transactional, and its moral authority evaporates. Internally, a narrative of inherent corruption breeds cynicism and paralysis, making reforms seem pointless. Why try to fix a system that is rotten from the start? Similarly, a nation that forgets its creative potential cannot build. If the dominant story is one of decline, exploitation, and insurmountable division, the spirit of innovation and enterprise dies. The ambition to build the next great bridge, to cure a disease, to explore the stars, is replaced by a focus on managing decay and redistributing a shrinking pie. A culture that loses faith in its ability to create becomes obsessed with grievance and limitation, looking backward at what was lost instead of forward to what can be built. The question then becomes one of diagnosis. We must understand the root cause of our current malaise if we are to find a cure. Is the problem baked into the country's DNA, a fatal flaw present from the very beginning? Or is it a more recent deviation, a wrong turn taken somewhere along the way? Is America intrinsically flawed? Its ideals of liberty and equality merely a mask for a history of relentless extraction and oppression? Or has it simply strayed from its founding economic principles, the very principles of innovation, competition, and productive investment that once made it a global model for prosperity and progress? The answer to this question will determine the path forward. It will define whether the goal is to dismantle a broken system or to rediscover and rebuild a successful one. One of the central themes of the book is a return to what it calls industrial nationalism. This does not mean isolation. It means prioritizing infrastructure, advanced manufacturing, scientific innovation, national sovereignty, productive employment. The author argues that prosperity comes not from financial manipulation, but from tangible production. Strong government intervention to promote development is presented as essential. The model is not austerity, not financial dominance, but national development aligned with human creativity. In this vision, America's mission is not to weaken others, but to inspire development globally. So what is America to the world? It depends on what America chooses to be. It can remain locked in geopolitical rivalry and financial dominance, or it can revive its historic role as a builder nation. The book suggests that the future lies in cooperation among major powers to solve shared problems. Poverty, infrastructure gaps, scientific advancement, global stability. Rather than seeing rising nations as threats, the argument calls for joint development. The author believes that modern times were created by bold economic vision, and that modern times can be renewed the same way. America's story has never been static. It is a nation that has reinvented itself before, from colony to republic, from agrarian society to industrial power, from depression to prosperity. The real question is not what America has been. The real question is what it will become. Will it define itself through finance or production, through conflict or cooperation, through fear or through creativity? What is America to the world? The answer is still being written, and perhaps it depends on us. If you found this analysis thought-provoking, make sure to like this video. It helps more people discover conversations like this. Subscribe to the channel for deeper dives into history, geopolitics, and economic ideas shaping our world. And share this video with someone who cares about America's future and its role in the world. Most importantly, leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think America represents today? And what should it represent tomorrow? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.